The observation spire of the Galactic Council was a needle of calm light piercing the chaotic nebula that swirled beyond the viewport. Within, Ambassador Klarn of the Vespid Hive smoothed his chitinous plates, a gesture of deep agitation. Before the assembled representatives of a dozen star-faring species hovered a holographic record, the subject, a backwater blue-green world designated Sol 3, Earth. "The preliminary audit is complete," intoned the Cerebrin archivist, its gelatinous form pulsing with soft bioluminescence. "The anomaly is confirmed. In the 4.5 billion-year geological and biological history of Sol 3, no external force has ever successfully conquered and held the planet. Not once. A wave of discordant hums, clicks, and psychic murmurs filled the chamber. Groll, a hulking reptilian species whose empire spanned 1,000 systems, snarled, "Impossible. Every world bears the scars of conquest. The weak are consumed by the strong. It is the first law of the galaxy." "The data is irrefutable," the archivist countered. "We have traced cosmic events, potential visitations, and intervention attempts across epochs. A Xylos seed ship attempted terraforming and ecological dominance during the planet's Carboniferous period. It was chemically broken down by the planet's hyperoxygenated atmosphere and consumed by the rampant fungal networks. Conquest failed. The Zral hive mind attempted a psychic subjugation during the rise of mammalian life. They were driven to catatonia by the sheer, chaotic volume of non-telepathic predatory dreams. Conquest failed. The Cathar Marauders, believing the dominant species, humans, to be primitive, launched a fleet during their late industrial age. The fleet was lost to a phenomenon the locals called the Bermuda Triangle, a zone of intense gravitational and temporal instability they themselves avoid. Silence descended, deeper and more profound than the vacuum outside. Ambassador Klarn felt a primal unease. The galaxy operated on a simple, brutal logic. Species rose by conquering or absorbing others. A world with no scars of subjugation was not a paradise. It was a statistical ghost, a terrifying blank space in the cosmic record. "They must be phenomenally strong, a hidden military power," suggested the ethereal Lumina representative. "Their current technology is substandard," the archivist stated. "Their weapons are crude chemical propellants and primitive fission devices. Their spacefaring capability is limited to their own solar system. Their society is fractious, divided into hundreds of competing political entities." "Then how?" Klarn buzzed in frustration. "The hypothesis," the archivist said, the hologram shifting to display a frantic, chaotic montage of human history, wars, natural disasters, pandemics, is that the planet itself and the evolutionary path of the dominant species, omnidirectional conflict so intense it crowds out any external threat. They are not unconquerable because they are strong. They are unconquerable because they are already in a state of total war, with their environment, with themselves. An invasion force, no matter how powerful, would simply become another faction in a pre-existing, infinitely complex conflict. It would be absorbed, diluted, and ultimately destroyed, not by a unified enemy, but by the systemic chaos of the planet. This was not a noble, unbreakable defense. It was a form of cosmic insanity, a world that conquered itself faster than anyone else could possibly manage. "We must contain this," Klarn declared, "not conquer, quarantine, a class OMA deadlock protocol. We isolate the entire solar system. We cannot risk this visceral resilience spreading its contagion to ordered civilizations." The vote was unanimous. The might of the Galactic Council would be marshaled not for invasion, but for the construction of an impenetrable barrier. They would wall off the mad planet forever. It seemed the prudent, the only logical course of action. They failed to understand that to a human, a wall is not just a barrier, it is a challenge. And a challenge to a species perpetually at war with everything is an invitation. The Silent Belt, as it came to be known, was the greatest feat of engineering the Galactic Council had ever undertaken. A lattice of gravity nullification pylons, stealth minefields, and dimensional phase shifters encased the Sol system in a perfect, imperceptible bubble. To the outside galaxy, Sol. 3, and its star vanished from sensors, replaced by a harmless false image of a dispersing proto-nebula. To the humans inside, the sky would simply stagnate. No new stars, no cosmic phenomena. A subtle, soul-crushing isolation meant to trigger societal collapse over generations. For 20 of Earth's years, the Council monitored from a distant outpost. They observed the initial confusion, the frantic telescopic surveys yielding nothing, the global panic that subsided into a deep, unsettling bewilderment. They watched as humanity's nascent starfaring ambitions withered. Without the stars to reach for, their focus turned entirely inward. The Council representatives relaxed. The feral world was being tamed by silence. They misinterpreted everything. They saw the sudden, massive investment in subterranean construction and called it retreat. It was the scaling up of geothermal energy and deep Earth habitation research, born from a determination to never be resource-dependent on a now hostile cosmos. They detected the explosive advancement in computational theory and labeled it escapist fantasy. It was the relentless drive to crack any code, including the physics of the barrier that had caged them, running on global distributive networks, originally built for gaming and financial trading. They monitored the unification of Earth's governments under the Terran Systems Coalition and dismissed it as a fragile peace born of shared trauma. They did not see the ferocious competitive collaboration that fueled it. Nations and corporations competing not with weapons but with breakthroughs, pouring their cultural propensity for conflict into a single unified objective: break the wall. The Council's critical error was assuming isolation would breed despair. For humanity, it bred the most unifying, clear-edged enemy they had ever had, the unknown they who had dared to put a lid on their sky. Dr. Aris Thorne, a climatologist turned xenopsychological profiler, presented her findings to the Coalition's War Council. "They aren't attacking," she said, pointing to the void where the stars should be. "They're preserving. This isn't an act of war in their eyes. It's an act of gardening, pruning a dangerous weed. They see us as a natural disaster, to be contained." Admiral Victor Chen, whose fleet now floated in permanent standby in Earth orbit, smiled a thin, hard smile. "Then let's give them a natural disaster." The Gardner hypothesis became the cornerstone of human strategy. They would not build a traditional armada to blast a hole in a barrier they didn't understand. They would weaponize their own perceived feral nature. Project Icarus was born. Not a missile, but a probe. Not for attack, but for infection. It was a vessel packed with humanity's most potent, chaotic, and resilient artifacts, samples of evolving computer viruses, aggressive mimetic ideas, translated into raw data, snippets of every genre of music from death metal to complex jazz, the complete genetic sequences of every disease-causing organism they had ever eradicated, and the schematics for every revolutionary invention, from the steam engine to the quantum processor. It was a cultural and biological Trojan horse, wrapped in a shell designed to do one thing: look like a piece of harmless, primitive space junk that had drifted to the edge of their cage. When the Icarus probe nudged against the Silent Belt's phase shift field, it did not explode. As predicted, a small automated council maintenance drone designed to repair minor fluctuations retrieved the debris for analysis and disposal. The drone returned to the nearest pylon and through it transmitted its data package back to the central council outpost. The infection was subtle. At first it was just glitches. The outpost's food synthesizers began producing bizarre, pungent compounds resembling cheese and spicy curry. The entertainment feeds were corrupted with sitcom laugh tracks and heavy bass rhythms. Then, the philosophical constructs of the cerebrans began to fragment, infected by human existentialism and radical skepticism. A Grohl commander, studying the transmitted texts on asymmetric warfare, started questioning the rigid chain of command. The Vespid hive mind, exposed to human concepts of individual liberty, experienced its first ever schism. The wall held, but the wallers were under siege by ideas they had no immunity to. The human plague had escaped the cage. It was a quiet, ideological virus, and it was spreading. chaos bloomed at the edges of the Galactic Council. It was not the fiery conquest they had feared, but a creeping intellectual malady. The Lumina homeworld saw the rise of a new cult, worshipping a challenging deity based on a corrupted translation of human existential philosophy. The Groll Empire faced its first ever organized labor strike, the concept imported via a smuggled data core. The Vespid Hive was embroiled in a civil Cold War between the collective consciousness and a new faction calling themselves the Self-Aware. And at the heart of the storm, the Council outpost monitoring the Silent Belt was descending into madness. The archivist, in a desperate attempt to understand the infectious data, had fully immersed itself in the human internet. Its once orderly mind was now a storm of contradictory information, cat videos, political rants, and apocalyptic folklore. It broadcast a final, garbled message to the Council. The feral world's defense is not a shield, it is a mirror. They show us the chaos we suppress within ourselves. We cannot conquer them because to face them is to face our own fragility. The Council, reeling, had no choice. They had to surgically remove the source. The quarantine had failed. Now, eradication was the only option. A Grand Armada, the largest assembled since the founding of the Council, was dispatched. Its mission: bypass the now compromised Silent Belt, enter the Sol system, and sterilize Sol, free from orbit. It was the logical, brutal response of a universe that did not understand what it was truly facing. As the Armada approached the coordinates, the false nebula image flickered and died. The Silent Belt disengaged, not from Council command, but because the humans had finally solved its operating principles by infecting its control systems with a particularly virulent strand of their own creative logic. The Sol system was revealed, not as a caged primitive backwater, but as a fortified hive. The gas giants were ringed with new construction, not elegant space docks, but brutalist shipyards churning out vessels that looked less like warships and more like armored asteroids. The asteroid belt was a labyrinth of hidden missile silos and railgun platforms, and around Earth itself hung a new constellation, thousands of satellites forming a dense, interconnected web. The Council Armada deployed, energy shields glowing, weapon ports humming. They sent the standard demand for surrender, the declaration of a righteous cleansing. The human response was not a verbal broadcast. It was a data packet, sent on every frequency, plain and unencrypted. It contained just two things. First, a single sentence: "You tried to put us in timeout. We got bored." Second, the schematics for the very weapon that had killed the dinosaurs, the impactor that had created the Chicxulub crater, along with detailed gravitational calculations targeting the command ship's position with a dozen asteroids they had stealthily nudged into trajectory. Before the Council commander could process this, the space around his fleet moved. The asteroid strike was a distraction. The real weapon was the satellite web around Earth. It activated not as a shield, but as a projector. Using the phase shift technology reverse-engineered from their cage, it didn't fire a beam. It painted a single, overwhelming, coherent sensory experience directly into the minds of every telepathic species and the sensor suites of every ship. It was the sum total of the human condition, not the curated beauty of art, but the raw, unfiltered chaos. The agony of a child's skinned knee and the ecstasy of a first kiss, the blinding fury of a betrayed lover, and the serene devotion of a caregiver, the soul-crushing boredom of a traffic jam, and the transcendent focus of a scientist on the verge of a discovery. The roar of a stadium, the silence of a forest, the cacophony of a stock exchange. It was the sheer, unbearable, beautiful noise of 7 billion minds refusing to be simple, refusing to be logical, refusing to be conquered. The Lumina ships went dark, their crews catatonic with sensory overload. The Groll battle computers locked up, trying and failing to find a tactical pattern in the emotional hurricane. The Vespid Hive ships literally tore themselves apart as the imposed unity shattered under the weight of billions of individual human perspectives. Ambassador Klan, on the bridge of the command ship, watched his Grand Armada disintegrate not from fire, but from empathy. They had come to exterminate a feral beast and had been force-fed its entire lived experience. It was the ultimate, unwinnable war. You cannot burn an idea. You cannot kill a feeling. A new, clean human transmission arrived, Admiral Chen's face on the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. "You built a wall because our history scared you," he said, his voice quiet. "You thought we were defined by the wars we never lost. You were wrong. We are defined by everything that happens in between them. The peace is what we fight for. The chaos is just the price. You are now aware of the price. Stand down and we will teach you the value of what we protect. Not to a superior force, but to a profound, terrifying understanding." Earth had never been conquered, because Earth's true strength was not in its defiance, but in its unbearable, magnificent, and utterly resilient humanity. To conquer them, you would have to feel everything they felt. And no one, not even the stars themselves, could bear that weight and remain unchanged. The humans did not claim an empire that day. They offered, for the first time, a very simple, very dangerous thing. A choice. Join the chaos and find meaning within it. The galaxy, trembling, began to accept.